Come and find me, Josh. The word sent a chill down my spine as I sat up in bed. I had just awoken from a dream, and the last thing I remembered was that whispered phrase. Annika? I said, as my eyes began to open. I was certain it was her calling to me, despite her voice being so quiet. I instantly grabbed my phone to text her and make sure everything was okay. I knew it was only a dream, yet I felt a knot in my stomach and the voice in the back of my head telling me to check on her. Joshua, call me ASAP, read the message on my phone. I felt dread wash over me as I read the name, Steph, on my screen. Stephanie was Annika's best friend, and she was at Camp Lumen with Annika and I where we met and became counselors together. I called her back and somehow already knew what she had to say. Josh, Annika, she went on a walk last night and her mom says she never came back home. I've been calling her back all day and I haven't heard anything. Her mother has already called the police, Steph said frantically through the phone. Where did she go for her walk? Did they look there? I asked with panic rising in my voice. Pioneer Park, she responded. My heart sank as painful memories began to fill my thoughts. Your grandfather was sick, Josh. He loved you very much, but he did things. Josh? Steph shouted through the phone, breaking me out of my trance. Sorry, yes, Pioneer Park. Did they find anything there? I asked. They found her blue beret, Steph answered in a quiet voice. I felt the knot in my stomach grow tighter and remembered my dream. Come and find me, Josh. I told her I was going to come to Alamer to help look for Annika, and I called into work and said I needed the weekend off. As I drove north towards Alamer, I couldn't stop thinking about my grandfather and the story my dad had told me when I was younger. He told me that my grandfather was a good man and he made a terrible mistake. I was young when he passed away. Now I was 19 and old enough to learn the truth. A truth that was more important than I could know then. The one thing my father had told me all those years ago was where my grandfather had died. Pioneer Park. I called my father from the car and put him on speakerphone as I drove. Hey Josh, my dad said in his usual cheerful tone. Hey Dad, listen, I have a few questions about Grandpa, I hesitantly replied. It took him a few seconds to respond. What kind of questions, son? I mean, he passed away so long ago. Well, what did you mean when you told me that Grandpa was sick? And what bad things did he do? I asked. Well, my father worked in construction, as you know. He also had a problem with alcohol and had lots of trouble with managing his anger. One day he was working at that public park up in Alamer and working with cement. My father paused. Yes, I said, trying to nudge him to keep going. You gotta understand, Josh. Your grandparents loved each other very much, but it was hard for my mother. She had an affair with someone my father worked with, and when my father found out, there was an accident, my father finished. The words hung in the air, and the silence was deafening. What kind of accident, Dad? I asked him in a quiet voice. He confronted the man who my mother had the affair with, and he shoved him. I guess they were working on top of the cement mixer, and his words hit me like a bullet, and I pulled over the car. No, I said when the implication finally sank in. They tried to get him out of there, but they couldn't. I mean, my father couldn't live with himself. He ran away and the police started looking for him. They found something a few days later. My father trailed off again. I could tell he was choked up and I didn't want to upset him anymore. However, one last question needed to be asked. Found something where, Dad? Pioneer Park. He went back there and the police said he must have committed suicide, but it never made any sense. They only found his hands. I sat there for a few seconds in shock. I didn't even fully comprehend what that had meant. His hands? I asked with a shudder. All they found were his severed hands on the pathway. Nothing else. My father finally responded with a shaky voice. I thanked him for telling me the truth, and I didn't have the heart to tell him where I was going. Instead, I hung up the phone and continued driving. My father's words ran through my head again and again. Before I knew it, I was pulling up to a sign. Alamar, it read. I continued driving towards Steph's house. She had agreed to let me stay at her place while I was there looking for Annika. Alamar was a small town, filled with nature. The beautiful trees that lined the road reminded me of Annika and the time we had spent together that summer. I felt such fear driving down that road. Fear that she could be in danger. Fear that I wouldn't be able to find her. Fear about something else. It was like a thickness in the air, a cloud of poison that had been suffocating me since that phone call. I thought once more about my grandfather and pulled into Steph's driveway. I got out of the car and she was already coming down to meet me. "Oh, Josh," she said and gave me a big hug. I could tell she'd been crying, and I tried my best to comfort her. She invited me in for tea, and we talked about Annika. She told me there were still no real leads, and the police had already searched Pioneer Park and the area around it. I told her I was going to go look for myself. I couldn't tell her about my dream without sounding crazy. I left my car at Steph's house and walked about 5 minutes to Pioneer Park. Before entering the park, I had to walk down a path completely covered in trees that blocked my line of sight of the park. As I turned the corner, my heart jumped. There was a man sitting right around the corner, and my nerves were already making me jittery. "You scared the crap out of me," I said to the man with a chuckle. "Sorry about that, son. Could you spare any change?" he asked me with a warm smile. He had very kind eyes, and based off his clothes and long white beard, I could tell he was struggling. I pulled out a $20 bill and handed it to the man. He seemed very touched and shook my hand, introducing himself as Sam. "Nice to meet you, Sam. I'm Josh. I'm here looking for my friend Annika. She went missing last night and she was last seen heading to this park. I'm wondering if you've heard anything about that or if you've seen her," I asked, hoping Sam may know something. His smile faded and he took a moment to answer. "Well, I haven't heard anything about that, but this place, it can be dangerous at night. Just please be careful out there, Josh, and keep your eyes open for..." He paused to find the words. "Anything out of place," he finished with a look of unease on his face. I told him I would be careful and headed out towards the main park. His words were unsettling, yet I trusted he was telling the truth. Still, that last phrase didn't make sense. What had he meant by out of place? As I entered the clearing, I was taken aback. The park was huge, and the gorgeous tree line had every color of leaves. It was truly breathtaking. But this was the daytime, and Sam's warning still remained in the back of my mind. I walked down the main path and kept my eyes peeled for anything out of the ordinary, or any sign of Annika. It crossed my mind that I really had no idea what I was looking for. I felt helpless as I walked deeper and deeper into the park. But then again, her words still echoed in my mind. "Come and find me, Josh." I must have stayed there pacing up and down the trails for a few hours, because before I knew it, the sun was starting to set. I started heading back to Steph's house the same way I had came, and made haste not to be at Pioneer Park past nightfall. I walked past the spot where Sam had been sitting, but he seemed to have left as well. Just as I was turning the corner to leave, I let out a yell. "What the hell?" I screamed out in terror. There was a statue standing right in the middle of the path. It was a statue of a tall man with an expression of hatred on his face. It was as though he was staring into my soul with his cold, lifeless eyes. At first I thought Sam had left this as some sort of joke. Keep your eyes open for anything out of place. Slowly I walked past the statue, keeping my eyes on it the whole time. I'm not sure what made me keep my eyes on it, but something told me not to look away. I backed out of the forest path with pure dread washing over me. The walk home, I couldn't shake that encounter. The statue had made absolutely no sense. Why would they make a statue with that awful expression? And why was it in the middle of the path? I couldn't believe that I had missed it the first time I walked down the path. I pondered the statue the whole way back to Steph's. When I walked inside, I decided not to mention anything about it, and instead I told her that I couldn't find anything, but I was going to keep at it, and that I was sure the police would find something soon enough. I really didn't believe that myself, but there was no need to dampen her spirits any further. That night I was laying in bed, staring up at the ceiling, thinking about everything that was going on. Just as I felt my eyes closing, my phone began to ring. I checked the time and saw it was past 3 a.m. Caller unknown, my screen flashed. I took a deep breath and hesitantly answered the call, but all I could hear was the low rumbling of machinery on the other end. Hello? There was no answer, but the sound of the machinery got louder and louder. Just as I was about to hang up the phone, I heard something else. "We are waiting," a voice whispered, and then the call ended. A chill ran down my spine, and my heart started to beat rapidly. I just sat there like that for what felt like hours before I passed out from exhaustion. I had a dream that night, one I won't soon forget. I was falling in slow motion. I heard that same low rumble of machinery as I fell, and all I could see was the face of a man looking down at me. All of a sudden, I felt like I was in cold water, and darkness began to close in on me. It became very hard to move or breathe, and the low rumble became deafeningly loud. Just as I thought I was going to suffocate, I heard a voice in my ear. "You have to come at night, Josh. That's when he wants you to come." I shot up out of bed and began taking deep breaths. At first, I wanted to drive home and never come back. I felt like that place was cursed. But then I thought of Annika. I thought of leaving her, and I decided I had to stay, because it was clear to me that it had to be me that saved her. I didn't know how she fit in with that statue or my grandfather's death, yet it was clear that it was all connected. I had to be the one to stop this evil. I told Stephanie that I was going to visit the library and look around the area surrounding Pioneer Park, and then I headed out the front door. When I arrived at the library, I was greeted by an older woman with a kind smile. "Hello, dear. What can I help you with?" she asked me. "Hey, I was hoping to ask you about this town. Are there any stories about haunted buildings or any dark past?" I responded. "I wish," she responded with a light chuckle. "No, there aren't any ghost stories here. Just a small, quaint town," she added. "What about Pioneer Park? I heard a man died there a while back." Her smile disappeared and was replaced with a look of sadness. "Yes, that was a tragedy, but that's all it was, dear," she responded. "But what about the statues?" I asked. She looked at me with a puzzled expression. "Honey, I've lived in Alamo my whole life. There are no statues at Pioneer Park." Dread ran through my body. I thanked her for her time and left the library in a hurry. I headed straight for Pioneer Park to revisit that statue and find some answers. I walked fast as though I feared the statue would move if I wasn't quick enough. As I turned the corner on the path, my heart dropped. The statue was gone. I was in shock. I felt so confused and defeated. As I walked down the rest of the path, I saw something that will haunt me for the rest of my life. It was my friend Sam. Only it wasn't Sam. It was a statue. "Sam?" I whispered while trying to hold back tears. It was him. Every detail of him. Except his kind smile. That was replaced by a look of pure terror. I ran back to Steph's house and cried the whole way. Something had done that to that sweet man. When I got back inside, I told Steph that there was something very wrong with that park, and that I think something might have hurt Annika. She asked me if we should call the police again, but I shook my head no. It was getting dark, and I knew what I had to do. I sat on the front steps until it was midnight, and then I started my final journey to Pioneer Park. Before I left, I told Steph that if I wasn't back by morning, she should report me as missing as well. My legs felt like jelly as I walked down the road, and everything in my body told me not to go, except I needed to follow Annika's call. Every part of my body was screaming to turn around, but all I could do was stare ahead at the entrance to that sinister place. I took one deep breath and walked forward. I had taken my flashlight with me, but as of now, all it did was help my imagination turn twigs and branches into evil creatures of the night, circling around me like predators. I turned the first corner and was relieved as the statue still hadn't returned. Then I looked down into Sam's corner and was surprised to see his statue was also moved. The thought gave me goosebumps, yet the empty site was actually a pleasing sight. As I walked the rest of the path, I once again was greeted with a terrifying yet gorgeous view of Pioneer Park. The lights were still on in the main area, so I felt more comfortable continuing through. In the far distance, I saw the silhouette of a woman. As I got closer, it looked more and more like Annika. I ran full speed toward the silhouette, screaming out Annika's name. Just as I was getting close enough to make out her face, all of the lights shut off. I was engulfed in darkness, and my blood ran cold. All of a sudden, I heard the sound of someone sprinting towards me. Taken by surprise, I fumbled around trying to get my flashlight out, and just as the person was about to grab me, I shone my light on them. The problem was, it wasn't a person at all. It was the statue of an old man, and something else. It had no hands. Soon I recognized a face I hadn't seen for half my life. It was my grandpa. "Grandpa?" I whispered as the words almost caught in my throat. He had a sad face, yet his eyes had a disturbing twinkle in them. I was frozen with terror and just stared forward. Then something broke me out of my trance. The static of a walkie-talkie. I looked down, and next to my foot was a construction worker's handheld radio. "Josh," said Annika's voice from the radio. "Annika? Where are you?" I asked out loud. "Run," she whispered. Soon my flashlight began to flicker, and instinctively I turned and ran away. I heard the footsteps of that monster chasing me, and just kept running. Up ahead in the distance, I saw the silhouette of Annika again, and she was standing under the last light that hadn't turned off. I finally got to her, and the footsteps behind me stopped, but something was terribly wrong. My worst fear had come true. My friend had succumbed to the evil of Pioneer Park. She had been turned to stone. There was something so wicked yet beautiful about her in that form. I didn't know what to do. I felt so demoralized. I had failed her. Just as I was about to cry, I noticed the radio was back on the floor next to my foot. I picked it up and spoke to whatever evil did this. "Please, just let my friend go. She's innocent." There was no response for a few minutes, and I just sat on the floor, grieving Annika and hating myself for being too late to save her. "What will you give me in exchange?" said a deep voice from the radio. For some reason, that was the only moment since I had come to Pioneer Park that I wasn't afraid. I talked to the man I knew to be the victim of my grandfather on that radio. I told him if he would free all of the people he did this to and never do it again, I would pay the price my grandfather once had all those years ago. I would sacrifice my hands. Maybe the evil spirit was feeling merciful, or maybe he was impressed with my bravery. So, instead, he told me two things. Only half the sacrifice will be required, but he stays. I took one last look at my grandfather, a man who had made a terrible mistake. I also remembered he had chased after me and decided he was a monster, just as his victim had become. I made the deal, and soon Pioneer Park was alive once more. I saw some strangers with a fearful yet thankful expressions run away from this place as fast as they could. I saw Sam crying, waving at me as he fled. Then someone tapped me on the shoulder. "Annika," I said as tears filled my eyes. We embraced, and I held her close for a very long time. There were no words spoken, just silent relief. When I finally let go of her, I looked down at my left hand. My fingertips were covered in a gray dust, and I understood it was my sacrifice. It's been 2 years since that night. It took 3 weeks for my hand to fully turn to stone. I got it amputated, and the spread never continued. It took a while for me to get used to my life with one hand, but every time I saw Annika, I was so happy with my decision. Pioneer Park is a safe place now. Sometimes Annika and I walk through it. You'd think we'd never come back after what happened, but somehow we knew there was nothing more to fear. Now Pioneer Park only had one statue. A statue that never moved, no matter what time of day. A statue with no hands.